I think the main message is, that we will never be free of noise. We will never live in a noise-free world. And to care about this issue is not to strive for that. That is, I don't think it's not possible, and I think it's counterproductive to say what we want is a noise-free world.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Neuroscience and Beyond podcast. I'm your host, Philan, and together with my amazing team of graduate students, we're on a mission to make science, especially neuroscience, more accessible and exciting for everyone. In today's episode, we dive into the fascinating and often overlooked world of noise with science journalist Chris Berdik, author of Clamor, How Noise Took Over the World and How We Can Take It Back. We explore how everyday sounds shape our health, stress, and brain function, from the way noise disrupts sleep and focus to how smarter design could transform workplaces, hospitals, and even entire cities. Chris also challenges us to think beyond just fighting bad noise and instead imagine soundscapes that actually enrich our lives. If you enjoy the podcast, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a comment below. We love hearing from you guys. And now, dear listeners, please enjoy the conversation with Chris Berdik. I'm very thrilled today to have Chris with us to talk about his new book called Clamor, How Noise Took Over the World and How We Can Take It Back. Before we start with the book, I'd like to ask you, what got you into noise pollution in first place, and maybe what got into science writing?
Okay. Great to be here. Thank you for having me to talk about this. The first thing about the science writing is, I started off in magazines, and I was not sure what sorts of writing or editing I wanted to do. I was very young, and I got a fellowship to go to rural Maine and speak to people who were working in forestry and in agriculture, and I saw that these scientific stories, they didn't require, to have the scoop, to have the breaking noise adrenaline. These were stories that kind of oozed rather than broke. And to me, that suited my interest. I love to dig into a story, and I'm driven by curiosity. I want to know, I have a question, I want to answer that question. And scientific stories lend themselves to that. Obviously, scientists themselves are driven by curiosity and asking questions. And so that started me down the path of really wanting to be a science journalist. And I wrote, I worked for various magazines. I worked for the Atlantic Monthly. I worked for Mother Jones. I've been a writer on staff at Boston University for a while. But I've spent better than half of my career as a freelancer. And as a freelancer, you are constantly pitching stories to editors to try to get assignments. And so you have to be omnivorous. You have to be searching everywhere, looking at all sorts of different topics and seeing what catches your interest first, because that will be a key. And I read a piece in the Harvard School of Public Health magazine about a researcher at that university who was looking into noise as a public health issue. And I thought, this person who was biking all over the city, taking noise measurements, I had never really thought about noise as a health issue. I just thought about it as something that bothered me from time to time. Or that it was an issue of things being too loud. I had a semblance of an idea, but really didn't understand the scope of it. When I started to research this, do the reporting, I should say, I saw the epidemiology connected to noise, which it links it not only to hearing loss on a large scale, but to cardiovascular disease, to stroke risk, to hypertension, to obesity, to childhood development issues. This massive public health impact which then you pair it with other deep reading into noise, which sort of says, noise is just a subjective question. We can't really define it. Noise is maybe a state of mind. It's a social construct. And I thought this is an interesting juxtaposition of a source of environmental harm that has so many health impacts that nobody can agree, what it actually is. So that really caught my attention. So that the story I first wrote about this was for the Boston Globe Sunday magazine. It was about this noise researcher, and the way I learned that it was something worth writing a book about was that I thought, okay, I wrote about this public health researcher. In doing the reporting, I heard about noise in very many different aspects of our lives. Noise in offices, noise as an issue of too many alarms in hospitals, noise, as loudness, and the ancillary harms from that. And so I started to write other magazine stories about this. I wrote a piece for Popular Science about restaurant noise. I wrote about noise in nature for a magazine called High Country News. I got a grant to go to India and meet with noise activists in Mumbai and Delhi, and it remained interesting to me. This story, this topic, kept being interesting, and I think as a freelancer, when you find a topic like that, then you think, well, this might be worth putting a book together for it. So that is kind of the story of how this interest became Clamor.
Mm-hmm. Very, very interesting, and actually logically, how you came up with the idea. Before I read your book, I never heard about noise activists, by the way, and now I'm aware of this. And I don't know if you know, but in Göttingen here we have one of the leading auditory neuroscientists, actually, Professor Tobias Moser, who is also a medical doctor. And he has some very, very cool work we can touch upon later on how to basically improve hearing aid, these cochlear implants, to make them better and basically to hear with light. What I can tell you about is later. So you dropped some terms or actually facts that noise can impact on your health or noise pollution. We can go there a little bit later. I think now it's logically to start with or by defining what actually noise is according to you, and how do we distinguish it from sound?
Yeah. Well, there are a couple ways to discuss this. The one is that I like to start by saying, to frame it as noise is not just one problem, and it's not just one thing. So when we talk about the definition of it, sometimes it's helpful to be narrowing down which noise we're talking about. So sometimes if you're talking about the noise that is the most dangerous to our hearing, this is the noise of loudness. This is the noise that is completely covered by decibel measures. Decibels are just the measure of acoustic intensity in a sound. And so in that way, you could say noise, when it comes to hearing, is above a certain decibel threshold that will start to harm our inner ears. But noise is also noise of distraction, noise of too many signals. That's sometimes how I think about it. I think that's a huge problem. These are when you're in an office space, there are other people talking about various things. You're trying to finish a deadline. You're trying to focus, and it's not that their voices are too loud. It's not that you don't like the sound of their voices. It's just that their voices, their conversation, is sending new signals to your brain to pay attention to, and you only have so much bandwidth for your focus. And so that's one. And then another one is harmful sound from, creating a stress response or disrupting sleep. And this is often measured in from transportation noise. This is noise that doesn't have to be super loud either, but it is a harmful noise because it triggers your fight or flight response, your stress response, disrupts the restorative period of sleep, and so that's another definition of noise could be unwanted and or harmful sound, because you're not necessarily liking or disliking the sound of the traffic passing through your window when you're trying to sleep. In fact, you sometimes don't even wake up, but it causes a physiological change where your heartbeat rises again, your blood pressure goes up again, and when that happens on a chronic basis, that has downstream health harms.
Yeah, these chronic events I can only imagine. Recently, I was in Köln. I was visiting a friend of mine, and his apartment is right next to the train station. You could hear all the trains passing by in the evening. I barely could sleep, and I really, really don't know how people could do this on a daily basis. This is disturbing your sleep. As you said, it's probably super stressful, and the noise is just unbearable. We can touch upon this later about the communities actually who have to endure this on a daily basis and what is the impact on their life. You mentioned about these physiological events or effects of noise. Can we maybe focus on cognition, for example? You mentioned also dementia in your book, and as you just said, heart diseases. Maybe we can start and discuss about this topic about health influence, basically, of noise pollution.
Sure. So, I'm not a scientist, so you'll bear with me a bit here on this. But the one piece of it, many of these noise impacts, besides the hearing impacts, are indirect. So they are primarily through a stress response, a chronic stress response, or a chronic sleep disturbance. And when we're talking about the stress response, this is often an inflammatory response where you in the short term it's good, because if you are about to get injured, you want to be able to heal quickly, so the white blood cells that are pumping out are certainly beneficial, but when that happens constantly, then this leads to a hardening and a clogging of the arteries, or it raises the risk of that, and that is the link to, or the major one, to cardiovascular disease. There's also dysregulation of your hormones, more cortisol, more adrenaline. These things get out of balance, and you end up having again the issues like hypertension, issues of not being able to regulate your overall response to stress, and then when it's sleep disruption, we're talking about one of the main restorative times of your life, when your blood pressure is lowering, when your heart rate goes down. But the thing about hearing, your hearing system is defensive from an evolutionary standpoint. You're sleeping, your eyes are closed, you are very vulnerable for 8 hours or however long you're asleep. So your hearing stays on guard, and it is listening for signals. And that is, every so often your body will perk up. You're not necessarily going to wake up and have to go to the bathroom or anything like that. It's just that the sleep researchers call it awakenings. These are short periods of time when your hearing is checking in on the world, and this leads to again, your blood pressure goes up, your heart rate goes up, because you're becoming a bit more aware of your surroundings. And when there are those noise interruptions, this is happening more and more and more, and disrupting that restorative piece. When it comes to dementia, this is actually largely based on research out of Johns Hopkins University, which is correlational research of people who have mild hearing loss having double the risk of developing dementia, and people who have severe hearing loss, quadrupling the risk of developing dementia. And so this is correlation, not causation, but the thing being theorized here is that when you have trouble hearing, you start to withdraw from social engagements. You just become more isolated, and this is something that speeds up cognitive decline. There's a similar finding, not out of Johns Hopkins, I think it's an Australian group, looking at depression. Likewise, the risk of depression increasing with hearing loss for similar reasons.
Very, very, very interesting. Do you think that, for example, when these stress responses are constantly induced due to some noise pollution, let's take the example with the train that is passing by your apartment. Is there a possibility for your body to kind of get used to this and then dampen the stress response, or this is not happening?
Yes, so there is a possibility for that to happen, mainly because at a certain decibel level, well, at a moderate decibel level, what your brain is going to pay attention to are signals rather than just sounds. So if you live in an area where you have gotten used to the trains coming by, you are less likely to, your brain is going to say, I can put that in the background. I don't need to pay attention to that. It doesn't necessarily mean that, you're immune to it when you're sleeping. That's not the case. But you are more able to ignore it, and thereby you're less disturbed by it. So that can definitely happen.
And what about the people? So, for example, I'm a very light sleeper. Every tiny noise wakes me up immediately. But my partner, my girlfriend, she sleeps so deep, it's just incredible. And she says, I don't hear this, it doesn't bother me. Do people that think that they don't hear it, are they also affected by the stress responses that you mentioned?
Yes, in a word. I don't know I think there are some studies out there that sort of look at the epidemiology and then differentiate it between people who say they are noise sensitive versus people who say they are not noise sensitive. But only in talking to the sleep researchers, the one that I spoke to the most is Matthias Basner, who's he's German, but he's now at University of Pennsylvania, and he studies what I mentioned before, these awakening periods. And he looks at people, the physiological impacts as transportation noise is piped into the sleeping lab, and folks, they don't wake up, they don't know what's happening, but their blood pressure is still going up, their cortisol is still increasing. These things are still happening to them, and then they wake up and they don't know that it happened. They don't say, that was a rough night. They say, I had an undisturbed night of sleep. I didn't get bothered by it, but they it still had the physiological impact on them. So I think there are differences. If you're a light sleeper and you are actually waking up and then you realize you're awake, and that you get stressed out by that in addition, that's more of an impact for sure.
Yeah, that is really it is a burden for me, but at some point you get used to it. Sometimes I use these earplugs, but then I hear my heartbeat, and then it's also like disturbing. Noise is basically everywhere, In your book, you also mentioned some case studies about cognition in classrooms, that also noise affects it. Can you maybe briefly mention also this aspect?
Yeah. So there are a couple of things a definition of how noise interrupts learning, we'll say. One is energetic masking. So if you are in a school that is near an elevated train, let's say, or something very loud, it's just going to make it impossible to hear your teacher you're not going to be able to make out what they're saying. That's one thing. But there's also informational masking, and so that's maybe it's not the loudness of it per se, but maybe it's just you are in a classroom that doesn't have good acoustics, and so the conversations of your classmates and other things are happening. Maybe there is some external noise, and this is when that distraction, that sort of your mind is trying to pay attention to too many signals at once, and so it can't differentiate. Oh, the signal that I really want to hear here is what the lesson my teacher is imparting on the class, and so that disrupts learning. And sometimes when things are noisy enough, the teacher will just stop teaching. They'll wait until the airplane has flown all the way over. And so that's sort of at the cognitive level. Now, there's also more neuroscientific evidence, and I'll go as far as I dare to talk about this with you. Nina Kraus, who is a neuroscientist at Northwestern, she runs a lab there, and she focuses on a collection of brain structures that she calls the auditory midbrain. And this is kind of, she describes it as like a grand central station of connections being made to understand sound, to not just hear it, but to sort of say, oh, this sound, this person is saying this, oh, it's from this voice, I'm connecting it with these facts that I know about the world and this emotional response. And what she looks at is when this auditory midbrain, these areas of the brain, are not functioning well. This could be a symptom of a brain injury, like a concussion, but it also could be that the inputs, the sort of bottom-up inputs into this area are noisy, are difficult to actually process. And so she looks at this as sort of saying this is a part of the brain that is central to learning, because we are kind of making these neural connections through sound, with sound, and it can be compromised by a noisy environment. So when people are in noisy environments, they have a harder time with like early literacy, for instance. And so that's kind of like a deeper neuroscientific idea about how noise impacts learning. But on the cognitive level, it's the disruption of the signal from a teacher, for instance.
That's very interesting that when you think about it, we have in our modern offices, right, constantly some ringing, some people talking in the background, and etc. I think you also touched upon this topic in your book, and it's actually quite interesting if somebody can measure what is the loss of productivity that we have because of this how to say, like non-effective design of our offices or buildings. It's really, really interesting. Maybe if you comment on that, that would be amazing.
Yeah. So, as you probably know, in late 90s or early 2000s, when many of the tech giants were coming into their own, they thrived on, like Google is a huge example of a place that said, we're going to remake work. We're going to knock down all of the barriers and the walls, and everyone's going to collaborate, a free exchange of ideas, and it became such a trend. People thought, this is what we want. We don't know why we want it, but this is the way we should work. Everyone together, no hierarchies, just collaboration and exchange. So the problem is that subsequent research has shown that sort of buzz of ideas actually is distracting to a lot of workers when they're trying to focus. It doesn't increase collaboration. It actually makes people put on headphones like this. They do a lot more emailing to one another rather than face to face. They Now a lot of offices have these silent booths, these kind of little phone booths that you go into to get some quiet. People will also just leave the office to go for a walk in order to escape it. And it's interesting because a Finnish researcher named Valtteri Hongisto was given the task to try to help offices in Finland that they were experiencing this open office noise. And because it was Finland, I think they really thought, they want to make everything quieter. Let's go for quiet. We want to put in more and more sound absorption. We want to ensure that the HVAC, air conditioning, etc., is as quiet as possible. And what happened was that made the problem worse, because now all the background sound that might have covered up and masked the conversations that you were overhearing was gone. So it was much easier to hear the coworkers. And he developed a metric called distraction distance, which was essentially how close or how far you had to be from your coworkers to avoid being distracted by their talking. And now it's actually part of the I think it's part of the required. You have to build offices in Finland. You have to measure it. It has to be part of your building code, essentially, to know what the distraction distance is going to be from what you put together here. So, I mean, the main point here is that these issues are not simply a matter of more sound or less sound. Sometimes in an office space or in a restaurant space, when you have very quiet backgrounds, you have more distraction. And some sounds, as long as they are not signals, like we talked about before, if they're just sort of this background hum of voices, that actually helps people to avoid distraction and to focus.
Do you think this kind of a background hum is like the white noise that some people use in order to focus, these binaural beats or whatever their noises to just get you into the flow and to work productively?
Yeah, that's the idea. Hongisto, in his research, would give people cognitive tasks, and he would have them either be in like a quiet room without any distractions, or he would have them be exposed to distracting sentences being spoken. And then what he started to do was he would add distortion. He would add distortion to the sentences so that they would become more and more garbled. And by the time they got to a certain level of distortion, I can't remember exactly what it was on the scale, but it was sort of like there's a signal to noise ratio where it's 50-50, and then it's sort of like a 20%. When you get down low there where you can barely understand the words, people were performing the cognitive test basically as well as they were in silence, because they were able to tune them out completely and not they weren't hooks to their focus. And so white noise is like that. It has no information in it. It is only there to turn those, what would be signals, into distortion. It's just there to kind of keep your brain from having to, from focusing on something that's intelligible, and that it might, think, oh, that's something I really need to pay attention to.
That's very interesting about distortion. I can say this in a different aspect. So recently I was in my home country, Bulgaria, and for example, when I go to the beach and I want to read a book, and there is somebody around me speaking Bulgarian, I just cannot focus because I understand what the people are talking about. And if there are foreigners on the beach speaking a language that I cannot comprehend, for me it's totally okay. It's just a background noise, you know. So not only the noise, but also the message is very important, as you already described, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing, like, just they've done research on just what you're experiencing. There's research on hathalogs. These are when you're hearing a half of conversation. Somebody's on the phone, so you're hearing half the conversation. It only distracts people when it's in a language that they understand. For that very reason, it could either be in a foreign tongue or it can be distorted like Hongisto did, but it's the same effect.
It's very interesting and it's kind of bizarre, you know. But yeah, I have to really find a quiet spot to read my books when I go home. Yeah. Although, you know, I can hear the beach coming, the waves, etc. But then somebody shouting, "Hey, come on, kids, let's go home," etc. Oh no! And then I'm not concentrated anymore. You know.
No, exactly.
I want to make one. To say something very important that I forgot actually at the beginning. It's very important for people to understand that in our auditory system we have cells, for example these hair cells and other neurons, and when we are exposed to a noise that is above certain threshold, you were talking about decibels, like I think above 120, maybe you correct me here, these neurons, these cells, they get damaged and some of them even die. And once they're dead, we don't get new cells there. So meaning that our auditory system will get worse and worse and worse as we age, usually, normally. And if we're exposed to this high noise values over and over again, we damage even more our neurons. And I think that you also touch upon this in your book, and it's very important to make this statement so that people are aware and try to use maybe hearing protection like earbuds. My girlfriend, she's from the Netherlands, and as many people are probably familiar, Netherlands is a nation that likes to party a lot, and people go to the clubs, go to concerts, go to events outside. And she actually made me aware of these earplugs. People even go to the doctor, design them for themselves, for their ears, and carry them always to these parties and put them on. I have never knew this before, and many of my friends don't know about this, and they're not aware. We just think, okay, it's a little bit loud, who cares, you know. It will adjust in 1-2 days. No, it won't. Your hearing, it will get worse. I just wanted to put this out there, you know.
Yeah, that's good. It's a great point because I spend a lot of time talking to people about the non-hearing aspects of noise. It's something that a lot of people haven't heard about. I talk a lot to people about what noise is beyond decibels, beyond loudness, because that's, again, something that, people don't pay attention to. But even within just talking about noise as loudness, noise as decibels, there's a lot people don't know about, and there's a lot of danger and risk that people are not aware of, and I think we should talk a bit about it. Inside the ear, the inner ear does an amazing job of taking vibrations that push and pull and vibrate molecules of air and turning that into neurological signals that your brain can interpret as all the sounds in our world. And inside the inner ear, there are these tiny little hair cells that kind of wave along in the fluid inside the cochlea that's affected by the vibrational energy of sound. And what happens is the cells trigger glutamate release that is turning that vibrational signal into a neuroscience a neurological signal. But if it's the more decibels, the more glutamate, basically, and that can create what's called excitotoxicity, and this will eventually kill these hair cells off. And that's what happens when you start to have the the threshold shifts in your hearing test, where the beeps are they have to make them louder for you to be able to hear them at some frequency or another. But before even that happens, at the base of the hair cells are these little nerve endings that come down and connect to the auditory nerve. And before the hair cells die, those nerve endings can be damaged. And what happens is you start to lose some of the finer grained pieces of information from the sound. So you can still hear that beep, but hearing is not sensing beeps. Hearing is much more complicated. Hearing is being able to identify where in space a sound is coming from, differentiate your voice from another person's voice, to pick out a certain stream of sounds connected to a source in a noisy environment. It's very complicated, and people start to lose that ability before even they have that threshold shift in the audiogram hearing test. And people don't think about that because it happens so gradually, and people often think it's just naturally a part of aging, but it is actually a combination of aging and exposure to too many decibels. Those hearing protection, the ones that people bring to the clubs, are amazing. These things they're not just your typical earplugs that are the smushy ones that you cram into your ears. These things are designed so that they take just a bit of the loudness off of every frequency, so you can still hear all of the music in perfect clarity, and it's just taking the edge off of it from the decibels point of view. So it's just softening it a bit and protecting you. So those are great. They cost maybe
exactly
$30, $30.
Yeah,
it's not.
Yeah, you can go get them designed for your ears, and then you basically carry them everywhere, and when it's loud, put it, and that's it. The person who I was referring to, Professor Moser, he's very aware of this, and he's always carrying these things. Even like in some big aulas with a lot of people, he just puts them in, and that's it. But I want to underline one thing that you mentioned, that it happens gradually, right? So I think we as a human species, we have not evolved to think long term. This refers to everything that we are doing and harms our health, like enormous amounts of sugar, smoking, drinking, right? These problems that these kind of habits carry with them, they're kind of they have their long-term effect. And we just do not think about 10 years from now, 20 years from now. We live in our space and time right now, and that's it. And whatever happens, it happens. And I think this would be an evolutionary leap, if we as a human species start thinking actually and designing our life considering the future, right? But this is another topic.
Well, it's true, but I think there's a social norm aspect of this. Some audiologists whom I spoke with said, it would be great if hearing protection became something like SPF skin protection, which, when your parents were growing up, nobody used sunscreen. It was just go out there and get as much sun as you possibly can. And gradually, without any sort of heavy-handed regulation demanding it, parents won't let kids out on a summer's day, at least here in the States, without head to toe with sun protection. It's part of cosmetics, skin creams, all of these things. Now it's a premium feature to have SPF sun protection. And so I think the line between the risks that we care about, that we think about, the sort of future that we keep in our minds, and the ones that we think it doesn't matter. I think these shift from time to time, and I have seen folks paying more attention to hearing now. You look at the crowds at big sporting events, and you'll see the youngest children there often with hearing protection on. I know there was a famous rapper recently, just very recently, who was performing in Mexico City and actually stopped the concert to kind of point out to, I think there was a mother there who had her baby, and he said, what are you doing? This child should have some kind of hearing protection. He hasn't chosen to be here. This is I think bit by bit you see people just, it's becoming part of the sort of social consciousness. Maybe not fast enough, but sorry to. I don't know that it is going to be enough, but I think it is something that I've seen changing. Maybe I'm just paying more attention to it.
Exactly. Maybe I'm too critical. As a future scientist, I like to criticize everything. But you're correct. I also saw this article about the rapper during the concert, and this was actually very cool. That somebody as a influential as this guy actually give example and make people aware, and maybe next time they will also think not only the mother with the baby, but the whole public. Think about that, consider about that. So we talked about how noise pollution can influence our health. What about our nature? You spend quite a bit of time in your book talking about nature and how actually we disturb animals and habitats because of producing excessive noise.
Yeah. So this is interesting because I think we often, just like we think about noise as subjective, we think about it as very human. This is something that we have created, that we interpret, and it affects us. And we forget that our noise can have an impact on non-human species. The research on this, some of it has looked at hearing and very loud noise, but that has shown kind of a limited amount of impacts. There is already loudness in nature. Many animals, not mammals unfortunately, but fish, reptiles, birds, they actually are able to regrow those hair cells that we are not. And the bigger impacts from our noise are the constant ubiquitous sounds that we put out there from, say, transatlantic shipping, in underwater habitats, in any habitat. Hearing is incredibly important to animals. There's a German word called Umwelt, which was coined in the 19th century by a biologist named Jakob Oexküll, and the Umwelt is just the sort of sensory world of any given species, which is going to vary from species to species. And the sensory worlds for, say, a deep ocean species, a whale, for instance, hearing is incredibly important because oftentimes at depth you can't see. There's not much light. They need hearing to stay in touch with each other over long distances, to find their way, to find mates, to avoid predators and find food. And when you have a background sound that's constant, like from shipping, which is a sort of a lower frequency dominated sound, it shrinks their sensory world. It makes it harder for them to communicate over distance. The studies of humpback whales, when they are trying to feed, what they do is they kind of go in these sort of circles, these acrobatic maneuvers to corral their small prey, and they don't do as many of these dives when there is noisy shipping around. They become less proficient at finding food, and many animals will become much more vigilant because they are trying to hear potential threats, but there's a background noise, so they can't hear it, so they have to stop what they're doing. There have been studies of birds, for instance. They will stop looking for food and just they'll have their heads up all the time, looking because they're trying to see, oh, is there a threat that I'm not hearing? And so all these things basically have a caloric cost. They add to the I don't know. Well, I'll put it this way: they just make everything harder for these animals who don't have a lot of extra energy to spread around. They can't put on any noise canceling headphones. They don't. They can't just find a snack to keep them going. They have a limited budget of energy that they spend doing all these things, and when their sensory worlds are shrinking due to our noise, it adds that stress to them.
I refer again to my holiday recently in Bulgaria, where I was lying in water, and when you lie on your back and your ears are in the water, right? And suddenly I heard this very loud noise, and I was like, what is going on? And then I saw like a boat somewhere and far away, just passing by, and I was like, wow, this was so intense. And I have no idea what the auditory system of a whale looks like, but I assume they have way more developed auditory system so that they can communicate with these ultrasounds and in a very large distances. So I guess for these kind of creatures it's a really, really stressful occasion when you hear constant squeaking of these ships going on, cargo ships, heavy vessels, it's crazy. And really, I've never thought about this before. Why was I aware of this? Because I read your book already, and then I was like thinking about, wow, there is something going on here, with noise.
Well, the studies are often at kind of a macro level, and they looked at the decibels of shipping noise that have increased over the decades, and from like the 50s until I think 2012 was when this study was done, and it was about 3 decibels per decade. So when you added it up, it was just under 20 extra decibels of kind of constant background shipping noise in the world that these animals have to live their lives. It's a lot.
It's incredible how even unconsciously we just pollute so much. Not on one hand the noise pollution, of course, the other pollutants, the chemicals that we put in, the gases and etc. It's just very sad that we think that we're the best, the almighty species on this planet, but we depend so much on these animals, especially the creatures in the sea that actually balance the CO2 emissions, etc. It's very important, but I really, really hope that your book and this message that you try to convey reaches more people as soon as possible, so that we can acknowledge actually and start thinking about how to maybe design our world without this noise, which makes me actually ask you right now about maybe the second part of your book. We can start talking. As you mentioned, sometimes reducing noise is not enough. Noises or sound is actually part of the game, so to say. Maybe we have to kind of live with it, and we need to try to design our environment in a way that is we have enough sound, enough noise, but it's not harmful neither for us nor for the environment. And maybe let me start by asking about soundscapes. You introduced this term, sound. What is a soundscape actually?
Yeah, soundscape is sort of the auditory equivalent of a landscape, and you can think about it sort of from place to place. The soundscape of an office space will have the air handling equipment, the conversation of people on the phone, some office equipment probably churning along or beeping from time to time. It may have also some external sounds coming in depending on where that office is situated. All of those sounds together are the soundscape of that office. And so offices will have different soundscapes than, say, a restaurant, different than a hospital. So that's what a soundscape is.
And so what do you think we have to do in order to start designing our cities in a way that they're, let's say, more healthy for us and more pleasant for the environment?
So this is tricky because there's so many different parts of the city. I will focus on green spaces, which are a very important part of the city. It's been obviously recognized that people enjoy being outside to recreate and to socialize, to escape the stress of city life. But oftentimes, the soundscape piece of that is not, people don't pay as much attention to it. I'll give you an example, two examples. One was, I was in Brighton, England, sort of walking around with a leader of the UK Noise Abatement Society, and she took me to a park, a beautiful park called Palmyra Lawns, with these Italianate 18th century houses on either side going down to the ocean. And at the top of that park, on the north end of it, is a very busy stretch of road with a bus stop right there. And we stood there for a while, and it was incredibly noisy. There were just vehicles one after another. This sort of really buzzy two-stroke motorcycle went by, and then the bus came by, and the bus had the hydraulic, the wheezing brakes, coming to a stop, and then it sat there for about 3-4 minutes, idling, and you could see in that part of the park, it was very beautiful, but no one was there. You could see in the distance, and then we walked farther away, and as we walked farther away, the landscaping of the park, the vegetation that was planted, the trees were there, and there was like a water feature that masked the sounds from the roadway. Then you started to see people walking their dogs, people sitting and reading, people having their lunch. There was somebody who had just finished a jog that lay down in the grass and stretched out. And you think, well, that is what you want to have happen in this park. The purpose and the role of a park is for these sorts of things to happen. And they weren't happening up there near the roadway because there was so much noise. So that's something you can observe, but it's also something you can plan for. It's also something you can think about ahead of time when you are designing your city, when you are creating the green space, that it's not enough for it to be green or beautiful, that the sounds that are surrounding it need to support the job of that green space, and it is possible to design for that. So that's, I think I'll stop there. I can talk about other parts of the city, but that's how kind of designing with sound in mind can be a benefit, and not only sort of avoid noise, but understand that sound can be an ally that is actually helping parts of your city function better.
So let's stay on the parks. Are there any examples of somewhere in the world where you're aware of people already doing that, kind of designing their green spaces in a smart way?
So yes, I would say one place I've been focused on here is Limerick, Ireland. Let me preface this answer by saying there are probably a lot of places that are doing some smart green space design, but I talked to the head of noise. He's sort of the guy that's in charge of writing the 5-year noise plan for Limerick, Ireland. And as you may know, all major cities in the EU have to have this 5-year noise plan. And part of it, if you're a big enough city, is to designate quiet spaces in your city. What the person at Limerick discovered was that the traditional way for cities to define these quiet spaces in their city was strictly by decibels. It was sort of, if this place was 55 decibels or below on average, then it was a quiet area that should be protected from noise, and it would then drive design over the next 5 years potentially to ensure that happened. But he realized in Limerick, their green spaces, particularly along the River Shannon that goes through the city, they were not quiet in that way, because the river itself was pretty loud when it went over small dams or rocky areas, and yet it was actually very restorative, because this is a natural sound. People went there to have the city sound be masked and to have kind of a relaxing, restorative time. And he has subsequently decided that what he wants to do is redefine what the quiet spaces are in his city. Not only to recommend that some of these places along the Shannon are quiet, but to look at he looked at a park in Ireland, or in Limerick, called People's Park, which is generally given very high ratings by folks for its acoustics, but there's an area of it that is near roadway, like that park in Brighton that I mentioned. And he's now commissioned some sound art that is going to be put in place there to bring, I think, river sounds. I have to talk to him, because he did put out the request for proposals. So the idea is that we are going to potentially add sound to a green space to mask the stressful sound of the roadway in the city, and bring in sounds that people are more restored by, find relaxing. And it's after the fact. This place is already, the park has been there for ages, but it is still, I think, a very smart way to do it. It's not just sort of measuring the decibels and saying this is good and that's bad. It's sort of saying this is what sounds actually mean to people. The sound in context, the sound recognizing that there are actually human beings that are perceiving it, and what does that mean? It takes a little bit more thought and I think creativity to do it. But I think I'm excited to see what they actually put together there.
That's actually very interesting. But first of all, I must say I'm a little bit ashamed as European. I've never heard about his 5-year plan about sound. So I learned something new today. But it's really interesting, because you can actually redesign already existing parks and then basically upgrade them so that they are pleasant and really recreational, as their purpose was in first place, even though they are next to some noisy place, right?
Yes, and I should mention, also that I'm in touch with some folks at in Munich at the Technische Universität München, I believe.
Very good, very good.
They are working with the city to study soundscapes, because there are 3 areas of the city that are going to be redeveloped soon, and so they are looking at these similar questions that we were just talking about there with the green space, and they're hoping that some of their findings will be incorporated into the redevelopment of these areas. So I think these are happening. It's piecemeal. It's not comprehensive yet, but I think folks are seeing that it's important to have a restorative city, and that sound is an important part of that. And it's not just about a number of decibels.
Exactly, it has several layers. Let's put it that way. It's
Yeah.
not like that easy and to distinguish or to comprehend and to measure it. Hey, this is it, decibels. No,
Yeah.
it has other aspects to it, right? München, by the way, there is a very beautiful, very nice park. It's called, I think, the English Garden. So if you ever go there, just go and visit it. It's huge and it's very nice. A lot of people are very water, nice trees, nice tiny monuments inside. It's really cool place.
I've been there actually.
Oh, you've been there? Okay.
I have, and I was there in the early spring, and it was surprise. It was I got a laugh out of it because it was not all that warm yet, but because the sun came out, people were out there in the English Garden just spread out, sunbathing, bare-chested.
This is typical German behavior. When there is a little bit of sun, everybody is out. That's it. Because sun here is scarce, you know.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
don't have it that much. Yeah. Cool. I'm happy to hear that. I don't know why I implied you weren't there, but of course you work with people from Munich, so probably you traveled quite a lot. And this is now part of the green spaces. But what about, for example, let's say some industrialized zones in the city, and maybe we can talk about this aspect that very often, unfortunately, people that are coming with have a background of lower income, families, they kind of cannot afford to live next to a park, and they have to live in a kind of an industrialized area or next to a train station or whatever, and they're constantly exposed to this kind of unhealthy noise levels. What can we do maybe to rethink again these areas in the city so that we can ensure these communities can have also nice life without this kind of annoying and unpleasant and unhealthy noise levels?
Yeah. When I think about when I did the research and the reporting to understand this noise gap, the fact is that so many of the things that are creating it are also adding other sorts of pollution to these same communities. The lack of green space, the industry, the transportation that is running through them. And so the answer to improving the soundscape in these areas is the same answer to cutting down the air pollution, the particulate matter, to making sure that the water is cleaner, and that there is green space. It is essentially to stop marginalizing them, because so many of these communities in the United States, we call them communities of least resistance. So this is when there needs to be a piece of infrastructure put in place that's going to have pollution associated with it, if it's the highway or the new power plant or the new wastewater facility, they go to these neighborhoods. And this is a deeper thing than just how to improve their sound. That's a symptom. So I don't want to try to duck the question, but the sort of the real answer is to have policies in place. Now, for instance, Washington State here in the U.S. has started to have a sort of environmental justice review of major infrastructure that could create these pollutions, whether it's air and or noise, other that all comes together. So when there is going to be they're going to cite some new piece of major infrastructure, they have to have an environmental justice review, which looks at the cumulative impact that it would have on certain places in the state. Now, unfortunately, they don't look at noise. That's not factored in. They look at what the current asthma rates are, what the current air pollution is there. They look at other pieces, but they don't include sound. And I would say we should include noise pollution in our sort of cumulative impact analyses, and those analyses should be brought to bear when we're making our decisions on siting infrastructure, and it should be brought to bear when we're thinking about what do we do with, let's say, this vacant piece of property. What can we do with this acreage? Well, a really good thing to do with it would be to turn it into green space, for instance, or to turn it into something that is not going to be polluting in these same communities. So I think that's the answer. It's to recognize the root cause of these problems and to include sound pollution if we are trying to redress those.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for going, underneath of the cause of this problem. Not only touching on the surface with noise. Going it deep. You didn't duck the question. You actually very nicely explained what is the reason, and that we need to take action actually to make a world a better place, right, for everybody, as long as we can. Is there anything that you want to share that we haven't touched upon, for some technological advancements that would improve, for example, noise pollution, or how we experience noise, or something else that we haven't touched upon yet?
Yeah, I would mention some interior noise soundscape solutions. We talked about restaurants. Now, I don't know for certain, but anecdotally anyway, restaurants are much louder here in the United States than they are in Europe.
You haven't been to Eastern Europe then, for sure.
Well, be that as it may, the reason why they are so loud now, and louder than they were, is that in the 90s, the trend became to have a sort of industrial look, to get rid of things like drapes and carpets and upholstery, and everything was hard surfaces. They wanted to have an open ceiling with exposed beams, and they brought in the kitchen from where it was and put it in the middle of all the dining areas. They cranked up the music. And so you had this big reverberant space with more sound energy in it. And subsequent people have been complaining a lot, and noise complaints have become sort of the top level complaint about restaurants. It's not, this food was terrible, or the service was no good, or it's too costly. It's that it's too noisy, and we can't talk to each other when we're having a meal. And people sort of recognize this. Now, the question is, then what do we have to do? Do we have to just bring the drapes back and the curtains, the carpets, and get rid of this very cool looking industrial aesthetic? You don't actually. What you need to do is plan the restaurant with sound in mind. And so the technology now exists to have an immersive auralization, like you create an acoustic model of a space that takes the measurements and the surfaces and is able to calculate how a sound will travel around and reverberate in that space. And then you take the actual sounds that you expect to hear in that space, say of people eating, or the kitchen working, or the certain music that you're going to bring into play, and you feed that through the model, and then you can sit there and experience. You can listen to this restaurant before you build it, and then you can say, well, is this what we're aiming for here as designers? And if it's not, then you can start to add sound absorption, say a discrete sound absorption panel or something on the ceiling. You could lower the decibel level of the music that you're putting into play until it gets to be a nice buzz that you still feel like you're at a lively place, but you can talk to one another. This is called 3D listening, and it's a technology that's been available for about 20 years. It was first used for some very high-end projects by some pretty high-end acoustics firms, but because computing power has advanced and these models have become much easier to put together, they are now being used or could be used in just about any project that you could think of. The one place that I know who started doing this with restaurants has since been doing it with multi-purpose developments that include pickleball courts. I don't know if pickleball is as big in Europe as it is here. But,
I mean, I heard of it. Just 3 weeks ago. I've never heard of it, but it's it kicks in now. It kicks in.
Yeah, well, it's a huge sport here now, and people really enjoy it. I like playing it, but it's very loud. It has there's a constant thwacking going on when you're near a pickleball court, and so pickleball noise has become a big issue. And now when you design a court, you can actually say, oh, this is what this pickleball court is going to sound like in your neighbor's kitchen when you're playing, or when you're trying to have a conversation in this neighboring office building, and you could say, oh, well, we should plant some large trees, or do other things to mitigate it. So this technology is there. It just needs to be seen as something that people want. That they can understand the value of it. To say, well, let's it probably costs a bit more to include a 3D listening model in your projects, but I think to avoid noise, it's a lot easier than to come in after the fact and try to shut down that pickleball court. Or, avoiding the problem is always much better than trying to fix it after the fact.
That's correct. Thinking in advance again. I think you can use probably this software not only for pickleball and the other aspect that you mentioned, but also about workspace, maybe hospitals, other environments. So yeah, I hope really, again, people are getting more aware of this kind of tools so that they can implement them. I mean, I guess now it's probably, as you said, a little bit more expensive, but in the future, maybe other companies will kick in and then the market will kind of reduce the price eventually. So that not only this kind of pickable space can benefit from the technology.
Yeah, I'll mention one other thing with that, which is hospitals, and we haven't touched on this problem.
Yeah.
But in hospitals, they have, year after year been amassing more equipment, medical devices, and all of these devices have some sort of audible alert and an alarm, and the thought has not been there, the forethought to say, well, what is it going to be the cumulative effect of having all these alarms going off on the clinicians that are working there, on the patients who are trying to sleep, and some of the audits of hospitals. I think not just in the U.S. I think globally, have shown something like 80 to 90% of these alarms don't actually require clinical intervention, and many of them are simply false alarms, like a sensor slipped off or something like that happened. And so the term that people use is alarm fatigue, because there's only so many false or nuisance alarms that a clinician is going to jump at and respond to as quickly as they might, if they know that most of the time it's just meaningless. And so the effort is underway to cut down on the number of irrelevant nuisance alarms in hospitals, and technology can help do that in various ways. One way is using artificial intelligence to analyze the patterns of these alarms and actually sort of personalize where the thresholds should be for a patient for when an alarm should sound, and that's very new, but it is another thing that where technology can help us tackle this problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember you also described one case of a guy who is actually who created a company, to kind of improve these devices and don't bother people that much, and it was about seconds of movement, but these seconds kind of in a situation where actually medical intervention is needed on spot right now are very, very crucial for saving lives. So that is quite good that you brought this up. So we have couple of minutes left from our conversation today, and I think we covered quite a lot from your book, and also we touched upon other topics. But maybe as a concluding words, I'd like to ask you, what would you like your readers, the readers of Clamor, actually, do I pronounce it correctly? Clamor? I'm really...
Clamor.
Clamor, okay, good. Thank you for correcting me here.
No problem.
What is the key message that you want to convey with Clamor?
Mm-hmm.
And yes, noise pollution and reduction of noise pollution, maybe.
Yeah, I think the main message is, that we will never be free of noise. We will never live in a noise-free world, and to care about this issue is not to strive for that. That is, I don't think it's not possible, and I think it's counterproductive to say what we want is a noise-free world. I think the goal instead should be sort of a two-part goal that I hope readers will take on as their own. And one is to have a broader understanding of what the noise threat is. That, as we talked about at the top of the conversation, it's not just one problem, it's many, and it's not just about personal nuisance and sounds that we don't like, but it's actually about all these other bigger issues, to care about heart disease, to care about chronic stress and sleep disruption, to care about environmental protection and environmental justice. To care about any of those things is to care about noise, because noise is a part of those issues. And so that's the first part. And the second thing is to marry that broader understanding of what the problem and the threat is with a more positive, proactive approach to it, and not just to be after the fact complaining and trying to whack-a-mole decibels, but to say, sounds can be beneficial to us. They can be an important part of our world that helps us be productive and helps us learn, helps our cities be restorative and our places function as we want them to be, if we are aware of sound's importance and incorporate it into our planning and our design. So those are the two goals that I hope people will take from this book.
I love these two messages, and I just want to mention that we're gonna put a link to your book, Clamor: How Noise Took Over the World and How We Can Take It Back, and maybe also some links from these key studies that you've mentioned, so that people can read up, even some of the organizations that you mentioned, so that we can increase a little bit awareness. And Chris, thank you very much for your time and for the lovely conversation and for the very, very, very valuable information that you shared with us.
It was a pleasure. Appreciate it. Thank you so much.